Today, I'm going to be reacting to your NBA hot takes. Let's talk about it. Okay guys, so I went over to NBA hot takes on Reddit, and we're going to be reading some of the top ones, some of the newest ones, and we're going to be talking about it and saying whether I agree with the take, whether I disagree with the take, or whether I'm kind of neutral on it. Let's start off with the first one. Our next post comes from Icy Pomegranate. It says, Anthony Edwards is who Ja Morant wants to be. And I think this take is a little ridiculous because, in my opinion, I think Ja Morant and Anthony Edwards are a very similar level of players. And I know that might be kind of a hot take now because of Anthony Edwards' success in the most recent playoffs and Ja Morant being a guy who was suspended and hurt all year last year. But I really think they're very similar. I think Ja Morant's team has not been as good as Anthony Edwards. While Jaren Jackson Jr. and Desmond Bane are really good players, and he had, Tyus Jones and Dillon Brooks, and those guys are all cool. I don't think he's ever had a team like the Timberwolves this year with Mike Conley, Rudy Gobert, Jaden McDaniels, Karl Anthony Towns, obviously. Like, the Timberwolves were stacked. I think Anthony Edwards is a really good player. I just don't think he's like a solidified top 5 guy. I also don't feel that way about Ja Morant. So I think it's crazy to say Ja Morant is he wants to be Anthony Edwards. I think they're very similar players, and I think next season we're going to see that. I think the Grizzlies are going to be really good next year, and I think they're going to surprise a lot of people. Ja Morant's a really good NBA player. Don't forget that. Ja Morant is a top 5 point guard in my opinion, at least in the conversations, right? And the point guard position is way more stacked than the shooting guard position, right? In the shooting guard, you have like Booker and Ant, and that's kind of the top guys. There's not really a conversation for anybody else. I think Anthony Edwards is maybe slightly better than Ja, but I think they're very close. This comes from Equivalent Bulky, and he says J.R. Smith, prime J.R. Smith, is a better offensive player than Shea. I think this is a ridiculous take. I think this is insane. Look, J.R. Smith was a bust. Like, you're not going to see me disagree with that. J.R. Smith is, he's a highlight guy, really good dunker, super athlete, could shoot from anywhere, was a heat check guy. But he was not even close to the score that Shea is, right? When we're talking about scoring, I think efficiency is key here. Shea is one of the most efficient scorers in the NBA currently, and today we're in the best scoring era ever. Obviously, J.R. Smith played in, prime was like 2010s, and while he was good, he was always a 6-man. I mean, if J.R. Smith was the offensive level player Shea was, I mean, J.R. Smith would be, in way different conversations, right? Shea is much better. He's a much better mid-range shooter. I like him much better driving to the basket. Look, J.R. Smith is an athlete, but I don't think he was better driving to the basket at all. J.R. Smith, to me, I think a lot of people look at the highlight tapes and think, oh, wow, he was really a good player. And J.R. Smith was good, but J.R. Smith was not great. J.R. Smith was a heat check guy. And we really didn't see the value of J.R. Smith until he got on a Cleveland Cavaliers team where he could just be like a spot-up shooter with LeBron, with Kyrie, with Kevin Love. That was really when we saw how good J.R. Smith was. He was good on the Nuggets and the Knicks. We didn't really see it until he got to the Cavs, how valuable of a role player he is. Shea transcends a role player, while Shea also does like playmaking and defensive stuff. Really, his main thing is scoring, and I think Shea's a top 10 player. J.R. Smith's never been even close to that. I think that comparison is disrespectful, personally. Our next tape comes from MB Plants, and I respect this guy for how hot his take is. At least he's not, holding back. He says Bronny James is going to be what Lonzo Ball was supposed to be. Okay, so I think we first need to look at this take. What was Lonzo Ball supposed to be, right? He was drafted with the 2nd pick, I believe, to the Los Angeles Lakers. And I think the hope was going to be a top 10 point guard, top 5, maybe, if everything went right. You could do it all at the point guard position. That was what Lonzo Ball was supposed to be. And I think we can say maybe due to injuries, maybe he just didn't live up to the potential. He didn't end up being that good of a player. Lonzo Ball grew on to be a very good point guard, right? He was one of the best defending point guards in the NBA, was one of the best playmakers. The shot got much better when he went to the Chicago Bulls and his later stint on the Pelicans, but he didn't become, number 2 worthy Lonzo Ball. Bronny James was drafted with the 55th pick to the Los Angeles Lakers. So you're going to tell me that Bronny James is going to be in top 10 point guard conversations eventually. And that's being, generous. Maybe Lonzo Ball should have been top 5. So you think Bronny's going to be even close to that? I think that's crazy. Look, Bronny, I think, could be an okay player. Like, I'm not one of these people who are like, he doesn't deserve to be in the NBA. Maybe he doesn't right now, but I think he eventually will be a guy where we're looking at him and he doesn't stand out as terrible, right? I think he could be a guy who deserves to be on a 15-man roster spot. At best, in my opinion, Bronny James is a good role player off the bench. Bronny James, at best, is going to be worse than Lonzo Ball's worst. In my opinion, I just don't think it's close. And I think the only reason you're saying this is because he's LeBron's son. And I don't like saying that, but if his name was Todd Smith, would you say he's going to be as good as Lonzo Ball? Probably not. Look, I think this take is insane. I don't understand where it's coming from. What has Bronny shown that he's going to be better than Lonzo Ball? Or not even better than Lonzo Ball, but better than what Lonzo Ball was supposed to be. I think this take is terrible. Just straight up. This also comes from MB Plants. He's keeping it going. And he's saying Larry Bird would average 5 points and 4 rebounds in today's era. Look, I'm not like a big Larry Bird guy, but 5 points and 4 rebounds? Larry Bird would be a very good player in today's era, right? For his era, Larry Bird was probably the best three-point shooter in the NBA. If he was in today's era, he would attempt so many that he would be one of those guys that we'd look at as a very high-volume shooter. Now, do I think Larry Bird would be in top 10 conversations if he played in today's era? No, right? I don't think he was, athletic enough to be in today's era. I think it would take some getting used to. But when you do these things of like, let's put this player in today's era, I think you have to have it where they're growing up in the era, because that to me makes the most sense. Larry Bird was like 6'9", 6'8", could shoot, could handle, could pass, could defend. Larry Bird would be fine in today's era. Once again, I don't think he'd be a top 10 player all time if he grew up in today's era, but I think he would certainly average more than 5 points and 4 rebounds a game. Look, I don't love the old era. I think our era is better, but we gotta stop with the disrespect. This take's crazy. Our last hot take of the day comes from Substantial Welcome, and he says Kevin Durant is the most overrated player of all time. The most overrated of all time is Kevin Durant. KD. The guy with 2 Finals MVPs, the guy with an MVP, one of the best scorers of all time, who's tore his Achilles and is still a top 10 player in today's era at the age of like 36, 35. He's the most overrated player of all time. His reasoning was he's a super team merchant. This is the type of basketball conversation that is to me just like TikTok conversation. That's like the only way I can describe it. This take makes no sense. Look, I'm a Warriors fan, right? So my opinion on Kevin Durant's leaving to the Warriors is always going to be jaded. But if you want to go with the conversation that Kevin Durant was weak, he shouldn't have gone to the Warriors, it was a weak move, he didn't prove anything, that's fine. And you can say, oh, he left the team and he hasn't done anything. Like, oh, these are all things that are fair things to say. Look, I'm not going to disagree with those. But at the end of the day, you cannot, look past the fact that he went to a team with Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, and Draymond Green, Andre Iguodala, and he was the best player on the team. I mean, that has to show something, right? This guy, in my opinion, is the best scorer of all time. Pure scoring, who's better than Kevin Durant? He's a 7-footer who can handle the rock, shoot from the 3 at a high efficiency, shoot from the mid-range at a high efficiency, get to the basket in his prime. He's done it for years. Kevin Durant has always been, at his prime, a top 3 player, right? We go, LeBron's been always number 1. Then you have, like, Steph, KD, Kawhi, Harden. Like, it's always been that mixture. But Kevin Durant has always been in those conversations and has been firmly placed at least number 2 or at worst number 3. To say he's the most overrated player of all time simply because he's played on super teams is ridiculous. Because you have to look at the super teams. He's been the best player on the super teams. You're putting the best players from the era, like Kyrie Irving and James Harden. Guess who's still the best player? Kevin Durant. You're putting Steph Curry, Draymond Green, and Klay Thompson. Guess who's the best player? Kevin Durant. Devin Booker, and Chris Paul. Kevin Durant still the best player. Russell Westbrook. Kevin Durant still the best player. Kevin Durant is not overrated in the slightest, and I think it's ridiculous to have that opinion. I thought this take died years ago that Kevin Durant sucks just because he went to a super team. Look, even if you think it's weak, the reason you think it's weak is because he's that good. If he was just mid, you wouldn't care that he went to the Warriors. The reason you care is because he's so good. Kevin Durant's not overrated. In fact, I would go as far to say Kevin Durant's slightly underrated when we're talking all-time rankings because people have this opinion on him from his super teams. He's, in my opinion, a top 10 player all time. I don't think most people would say that. I think that's fair, but that's my opinion. I think he's underrated. To say he's overrated, you would have to have the stance that he's like a top 30 guy, maybe top late 20s. That would be your conversation, and I think that's crazy. Look, once again, I like people saying hot takes, but this hot take is simply stupid. Okay, guys, it's time to let me know. What, in your opinion, is the best hot take on this video? What, in your opinion, is the worst? Do you agree with my opinions on them? And what's your biggest hot take? Leave it down in the comment section below. I'll see you guys in the next one.